so much.
Great. Of course. All right. To start off with, can you please introduce yourself and the position you're running for?
Hello, my name is Saisal Mazaman. I'm a rising junior majoring in psychology on the pre-med track, and I'm running for the position of Vice President of Academic Affairs.
Great. So, have you held any positions in USG previously? What experience do you have with student government, whether a part of it or from the outside?
Yeah, thank you. So, I have been a part of USG for the last 2 years now, and if I get positioned this time, it will be my third year. And in USG, I was very heavily involved with academic affairs and student life committee. So those two were my primary committees. For student life, I used to be the foods committee chair. So a lot of the food initiatives that were going on and are all the benefits that you can see that have come out from the initiatives. Like, I mean, there's still a lot of work to do, I'm pretty sure, but there's like I think there's been an increased amount of like vegetarian options on campus for a few for the like compared to the last few years now, and a lot like we have also done Ramadan boxes for like Muslim students on campus this month. So I've been a part of that, and I've also been a part of the transportation committee. So a lot of the works we do was work with shuttles and making sure that people have more access. And I know one of the issues where shuttles was they did not have any scheduled breaks. So that is some initiative that we've been going on about for a few years now, and that's something I did not spearhead, but I was a part of that. And I've also been the admissions and aid committee chair. So for the academic affairs, that is what I do currently, where I review like special admission cases or like special applicants that I feel like would benefit or would need some special scholarships and considerations.
All right, great.
So
So, yeah, go ahead. All right.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Go on.
So, what is your platform? Why are you running to be, VP of Academic Affairs?
Right. So there are a couple of reasons for this. Some of my more important initiatives are to make a syllabus archive where, because I know a lot of students complain about not knowing what courses are going to be taught or like what subjects going to be taught. So a lot of people don't know the topics within the classes, right? Because there's a general description that we have, but like it's very generic and it doesn't really talk a lot about what exactly is going to be covered. And like it doesn't talk about the workload and what else is there. So that is something I want to do. I also have been working on this initiative to increase the drop ed period. And it's been hard because like since I'm not the VP, I cannot get in constant touch with the administration as much, which is why I want to run for this position so I can get in constant contact with the administration so we can increase the drop ed period. Because if you see a lot of other like really like R1 research schools have like increase like drop ed periods that even last for like a month or 2 months. We just have like for 3 weeks, I think, or like 2 weeks, which is not that great for students to decide because sometimes you might be interested in a class, but then the workload might be a lot, and you probably do want to like drop the class or like add some classes, whatever it is. So that's something I want to do. I also want to improve the navigator program. So I know there's been a lot of people. The navigator program is very underutilized because I think most people just talk to the advisors, and that is something they can do. We have been talking with that administration to get rid of the program, but I think they're very against it. So this time I think I'm gonna take a different approach, and instead of trying to get rid of it, I want to make sure that we make it better so that people can actually use it and like benefit from it. Like I want navigators to also be a source of constant contact, not just advisors, because that will also lift some of the pressures from the advisors too. I also serve as like I said, the admissions and aid committee. So I think by doing that and having the opportunity to select special applicants that would deserve like special scholarships or like review special admission cases. So let's say someone we're not sure if they should get in or not, or like where they come from, or like what they can bring to the table. Like those are some cases I have looked at, and with that, what I can see is that like if I do get this position, I'll be able to increase the diversity on campus. So like get more students of different backgrounds and like socioeconomic statuses from here. Also, one of the major reasons why I want to run is if I'm able to talk to the administration, I also want to make sure we get more people of color as teachers because I know they are very beneficial for other underprivileged communities. So that are all the reasons that I want to run for the vice president of academic affairs.
All right, great. So I think the Navigator program, they're tweaking it somewhat, or they're changing the advising system somewhat. They haven't
Right.
revealed the details yet. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that works out. Um, so you're somewhat familiar with the Academic Affairs Committee. What is something that you think they've done well over the past year, but something that you would change if you became VP?
Right. So one thing that we've been doing well is I think we're doing a lot more campus-wide initiatives. And what I mean by that, or campus-wide, is let's say the syllabus archive, what we're currently working on, that is something that's a campus-wide initiative, as in like a whole committee-wide initiative. So that's something as a whole committee we try to do. So it has a lot of traction, which is nice because I think people will really benefit from it. And having everyone in the committees do a one single initiative just makes it more important for the administration to consider as well. So that is something we have been doing pretty well. One thing that I've always noticed with the Academic Affairs Committee in general is that there has been a lack of participation. So some people are doing a lot, whereas other people might not be as engaged. That is something I want to change because the more manpower we have and the more people we have working on different initiatives, that means we can get more things done instead of like one person doing like three different things. So that is something I want to change. Definitely improve the Navigator program because I think we have not been able to do that for a while now. They have been tweaking it a little bit, but I don't know how beneficial it is. I think the most important part is to get students to trust the navigators again. Because I know like you can have all the resources, but if students do not trust the resources or they do not think it's going to be beneficial, there is little point in making it better. So that is something I want to do. Make
All right,
sure
great.
I get the voice out to the students so that they can know what new things are being done every day. I want to increase the communication between each committees. So I want to make sure Academic Affairs Committee also meets with a lot of the times with communications committee so that we can get it out to the student body that hey, these are the things that we are doing and these are the things that could benefit everyone.
All right, great. So as a VP, you would be joining the exec board of USG as well, the exec
Right.
committee. So is there something, an aspect of USG, perhaps outside of academic affairs, that you'd also like to look into improving, whether it be in the scope of your position or beyond?
Well, since I've been working with a lot of obviously academic affairs, but also student life, and if you could just like from aforementioned things that I've said before, you can obviously see that I've been very involved with like the food subcommittee. Like I've also been the operations manager and the secretary of the Physical Resource Center, which is not a part of USG, but that's a branch that we have. So that's essentially, if you don't know what that is, it's on Carlton Road where we give free supplies to students. So as an exec, I would want to expand that service because I think it's still very underutilized. Like we have a lot of good stuff, but if we can get like a bigger space and we can have like more donations coming in, so the students that are less fortunate could use the free resources. Because there's a lot of books that we have. If we can increase the amount of books we can bring in, I think that would be great. Obviously, I want to make sure the food scene of the campus gets better, but I don't think that's will be under my scope as the vice president of academic affairs. But I
Mhm.
have been the chair for 2 years now, and I can definitely offer some valuable support to the next chair, whoever that is. So those are going to be some of the things that I would want to push forward as a VP. That is not just as a VP of academic affairs, but as a person of USG.
All right, great. So what do you think, as a cruise student, what do you think are the biggest challenges that cruise students face in the classroom, and what can USG do to advocate for for those students?
Right. I think one of the biggest challenges students face is just interacting with professors, especially not I'm not talking about like small classes because there are some classes that are like 17 students or like 18, 19 students. Like they have more one-to-one time and one attention from like student from the professors, but that is not something everyone has. So especially for like very large like major classes like chemistry, like I know most of the students are pre-med, right? So we obviously take a lot of chem classes. Like there's a like a very even physics, those are like the large classes. So there isn't much of a one-on-one attention that goes on, and most of the time only SIs are the ones that are able to interact with the students. So one thing I would also want to do, I think, is improve the SI program. I think I would want to expand the supplemental instruction program so that like there are more people that can give a helping hand to students. And also I think I want to I this goes into the broader spectrum of wanting to diversify. The the professors on campus, so like have more people of color come in so that they can better accommodate other students, or like, because like cultural barriers are a thing, and I want to eliminate that as much as I can when it comes to like student professor relationships. So I think that will be something that I want to pay a lot of attention to
All
on
right.
classes.
All right, great. So part of the role of being VP of Academic Affairs as well is being one of the few students to sit on the faculty senate. Most students don't know what goes on there at all. But how do you think you can use your role there as sitting on the faculty senate to help the student body? How can we increase transparency around the decisions there, especially when they are so consequential?
Right. So for those that do not know much about the faculty senate, it's essentially like one of the benefits of just being a vice president of academic affairs is I get a lot of exposure to a lot of administration that work with students to improve the academic scene on campus. Like I will be able to work with a lot of administration that work for, let's say, making the S like who are in charge of the SI program, who are in charge of the navigator program. So that is something I could do. I'm a big on listening to other people and like getting feedback. So I think that is something I will definitely consider. I have a tendency to ask a lot of people and like get a lot of like um gauge the student body's interest. So I'll be definitely asking around. Like I said, that is one of the things I also want to make sure the communications committee and academic affairs committee can work closely together, because communications committee is the committee that sends out the emails to the student body.
Mhm.
So if we have regular meetings and like exposure to them, we can definitely like send out emails to the student body to make sure that they know what's happening, or even we can make surveys to make sure to know what students want from us, right? So like if some students feel like, oh, this program should be improved, they can we can make a survey and they can let us know so that I can go and talk to the admins and relay the concerns. And with that concern, I think they can take better steps, and even the admins, because the only way administration will know what students are going through is if like student representatives are on the table and they've like put their ideas forward, which does not happen a lot unless you're in USG or like positions of power, like in the administrative positions, like the vice president.
Mhm.
So I will definitely get a lot of feedback from students and relay the concerns and talk with the administration to make sure that we can collectively solve the issues.
All right, great. So this is something that the faculty center worked on for a long time, is the current overhaul of, SAGES that is happening next year. So, it's a huge curriculum overhaul with the new general education requirements and all that stuff. So what do you think USG's role is in that transition? And how do we ensure that, faculty and administration know, how we feel about these new classes? And, how do we gather feedback in that regard?
Right, so one of the best ways to, I think, gather feedback is just through surveys, which is something that I want to do a lot with the communications committee. So I definitely want to talk a lot with the vice president of the committee to make sure we're on the same page and they know what's going on with us so we can relay the information to other people. And I think there has been, as you can see, obviously, like they are going to change the SAGES program, so the student concerns have been heard, and that is something the VP of the past of academic affairs were able to do, which is also the reason why I want to run for this position, because I feel like if I do get the position, I can better use my voice to advocate for student body and change programs in the way that they need to be changed so that students have a good time studying at Case instead of like having a hard time studying at Case.
Right. All right. So crew is also going to be experiencing like larger and larger incoming classes, incoming cohorts each year. And that's been the case for the last several years now. So how do you see the sort of impact in the academic environment at crew, do you think? And is there anything that USG can do to help that sort of?
Right. So that is definitely a concern I think a lot of people in the student body has shared. Even while we're in USG and sometimes we have like meetings, the USG General Assembly, we talk a lot about it. And that's something we've also been repeatedly asking President Eric Kaler about, because I think the first year when I was a freshman, and I was a rising sophomore, that is when a lot of like influx came in of new students. And one of the concerns was, and we could obviously see that a lot of people's housing situation had to be changed, or like some seniors had to live on like south side or like things like that in order to make sure that people are like the needs are being met. That being said, I think the what we USG can do and what I can do as the vice president of academic affairs is obviously make sure we increase the amount of professors that are also on campus, because I know a lot of professors are overworked in the sense that they are taking multiple classes. So if I can talk to the administration, I would definitely request them to hire more professors and professors of color who can come and teach in the university and take some of the workload off, so that students do not have to like fight for to get some classes, but they can instead just get more classes that offer the same material so that students have better engagement from professors.
All right, so that faculty to student ratio is around 10 to 1 right now. I think
Right.
Taylor said if we increase it, we'll be getting to 11 to 1 if once all of his changes take place. Do you see that having any impact, especially in like larger class sizes and stuff like that? Like, people talk about like we can create new sections. Are you pro or against that? I don't know. What are your feelings about creating more sections, having more sort of load on that sort of sense?
So I think for creating more sections, that's definitely something that I'm for, because I know a lot of the times because of increased student body, one of the ways you can actually accommodate them is through making more sections, because otherwise a lot of people are not able to take the classes. Like I know for me, when I enrolled in chemistry to laboratory class, I wasn't able to get it unless they made a new section for us. So I think in a way, because there has been so much more students coming on the campus, and one can even argue a lot more, and even I argue that a lot more than CASE can handle currently, with the amount of students it has and like the budgets that it has to pay professors. But if we have more sections, then other people that might not be able to get the class will be able to get the class. And that, some ways that could be overworking this professors, because they will still be the ones teaching those classes, which one could also argue that will lead to detrimental effects. But I think that is why I also want to talk to the administration about increasing more professors on campus and hiring more professors, so that the student to professor ratio gets smaller, and then there's like more individualized attention for the students on campus.
All right, great. So those are most of the questions I have. To finish off, I always like asking people, what do you love about Case Western Reserve? And then what's one thing
Mhm.
you wish you could change about it, whether it's like a serious thing or a fun thing or something like that.
Okay, so one thing I love, I think a lot of people share the sentiment, is it's not a it's a competitive university, but it's not the toxic kind of competitive university, right? It's where everyone is definitely very ambitious, and everybody has a lot of like dreams in life and life goals and things that they want to achieve, but they're also willing to help other people. They don't really we don't see each other as just like competitors to like make sure that we do better than everybody else, but we're also like engaging with other students, making sure people are we help out other students that are might need it. So that's something love. Something I hate would probably be, sometimes I feel like case we make decisions without knowing the repercussions of it, right? So like sometimes
Yeah.
we'll like increase, like one of the things I said, increase like the number of students coming on campus, but we might not have enough spaces for them. So that is definitely something I think Case has done that wasn't the best decision to make. But I think as VP, I would like to make sure that we get like more student engagement and increase professors on campus to make sure that um those needs are being met, and that their students are still getting the quality education that they deserve.
All right, great. So is there any final words that you want to have either for the Observer Editorial Board or just the entire student body? Any message?
I would please just request all of you to vote for me if you guys can. Please read all the LOIs. Like every candidate is really good. A lot of people have a lot of experiences on campus. I will definitely, like I want to say this, I'm your friend, I'm a listener and a student advocate, and hopefully a representative if you guys vote for me.
All right, great. Thank you so much. That's all the questions I have. All right, so welcome. This is going to be a series of interviews that we're having between USG potential candidates and the Observer. I'm Shreyas, the executive editor. So to start off with, please introduce yourself and say what position you're running for.
Hello, my name is Hyunjung Koo, and I'm currently a third year nursing student going into my fourth year. I'm running for the Vice President of Academic Affairs for undergraduate student government.
Great. So far, what positions have you held in USG? Tell me a bit about your experience there.
So far, I have been part of USG as a nursing representative starting from the last school year, and I've also been the nursing caucus liaison for the academic affairs committee. For those that are unaware of what a caucus liaison does, in the academic affairs committee, we have a caucus liaison for each individual school, like the Weatherhead School of Business, like and etc. And we have a representative that will communicate with each dean of each school to make sure that each initiative that we're working on is being held accountable, is being done as we would like on a timely manner. And we're communicated about what other projects that the school is each working on at the time.
Great. So tell me a bit about your platform. Why do you want to be the VP of Academic Affairs?
So far, I became part of undergraduate student government in my third year, which is a little late for a lot of people, because of the fact that I saw a lot of issues within this campus that I felt like could be changed. And a lot of those issues pertain to like a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion in in our classrooms. And that was something I wanted to fix. And that was why I became part of academic affairs, specifically when I joined USG. So I held out till my third year. I managed to restrain myself from doing anything about it till my third year. And then now, going in, I wanted to see more equitable classroom access for disabled students. I'm currently receiving accommodations through the Disability Resources Department, which has always been a bit of a struggle. I know before, I'm actually pretty familiar with the Observer, having written an article myself about roughly a year ago now, and exposing some of the racism that has been faced by a lot of POC students like myself with the nursing department. And I felt that it's best for me to be able to implement and see some of the changes that I want seen on this campus through the position that I'm running for, which would be VP of Academic Affairs, which works with our undergraduate studies department.
Yep. All right, great. So what is one thing do you think that Academic Affairs as a committee has done well over the past year, and what's something that you think could be improved?
I think we have had a very good relationship with the undergraduate studies department, and it's been a very fruitful discussion in terms of some of the things that we're currently working on. One of our bigger projects as a whole committee has been revamping like the navigator program. Like overall, CASE is currently discussing kind of redoing the whole program altogether and moving to a more pre-advisor system. It's a little more in the books now. It's not been completely done over yet. I know the email went out a couple weeks ago, but it would allow for students to feel more like they're getting specific feedback for what they want to go into, and would help students to not feel super lost about what exactly a navigator does. And it would allow for students who don't have a major determined yet to get more advising on the academic front, which is not something that navigators usually exactly did. Navigators were more kind of like someone who would direct you in the right direction when you needed advising on a certain front. Like they would know which resources to get for you. But in a pre-advisor system, it would be professors themselves. So therefore, they would have a little more understanding of what our academic system looks like.
All right, great. And then what's something about USG as a whole that you think needs improvement, whether it's within the scope of your position or just overall?
For USG, I think this year, I guess like I'm trying to word this in a way that doesn't sound like it's super critical. It's
Sure.
that I personally wish there was a little more talking within our GA. I know this year we have had a little bit of more conservative candidates in terms of the speaking times, and sharing some of our opinions on some of the matters that come to our table. And I think I want to see a little more forward candidates, I guess is the best way to put it, who are more driven and want to speak their opinions and debate some of the things that come to our floor, because without debate, there's no point in having those meetings. There's no point in like holding student government when it becomes like every issue that comes up, we vote on it. And like, yes, you can show your opinion through a vote, but there's a lot of details that fall through the cracks in just a voting system and a simple voting system. So it would be greatly appreciated if we could get more candidates this year who are willing to speak up during our General Assembly times.
Yeah, let's hope that happens. All right, let's do some more academic affair related questions.
Mhm.
So what personally do you think are the biggest challenges facing crew students in the classroom specifically? Like what do you think USG can do to advocate for those students as well?
Since I'm a nursing rep, I guess a lot of my details pertain to the nursing school specifically, although I don't want it to seem like I won't focus on outside of the nursing school once I am the VP of Academic Affairs. It's just that right now in my position, that is what I am focusing on, fulfilling that for the rest of this year before elections happen. Right now, one of the things that I'm working on that is part of my letter of intent was we are trying to find accommodative testing spaces within the HEC, or what most non-nursing majors call the Samson Pavilion. Due to the architectural design of it, it is a very open space. Also, if you've not been in that building, you can tell the noise very much rings through that area. So it hasn't provided a lot of private spaces for students who are getting accommodated testing to be able to do that. Right now, I believe nursing students who have accommodated testing have to be on the quad, and the accommodated testing building is where they get it, which is quite farther out from where our testing area is. And for nursing students, because especially my cohort right now, the class of 2024 is very small, we can kind of tell when people aren't showing up for tests. And so it becomes an issue of privacy where we inadvertently, even if we're not trying to pry into anyone's business, if we're not trying to know about that, we kind of know like, oh, like this student is probably getting accommodated testing. That's one of the things that I really want to see overall in Case Campus. A lot of accessibility, not just in the classroom, but just overall. I know our quad is very old. It's not the most accessible like area ever. I know the HEC and Samson Pavilion is not either. I know I've talked to a lot of lab TAs who are grad students within the School of Nursing, who have discussed with me in length about how it's like very inaccessible because due to, especially for visually impaired people, due to like how it's painted. It's just like all white, like no differentiation, especially with the stairs. Our elevators are very well put in. However, like everything else is like could use a lot of work. And I want to see that change like implemented, especially as Case Western tries to expand our campus and we're putting in those new buildings. If we cannot change the current buildings that we have now, I want to see those changes in the new buildings. I want to make sure that ADA laws are being kept. As you can tell, like disability access is something that I'm like very much working hard on. I want to make sure that all professors are being held to a standard that is acceptable for students. Students should not only be held to a standard. I believe professors and staff and faculty have a responsibility to be held to a standard. For example, like I don't want to have a professor who I feel treats me not as an individual who should be respected as their student, but and I want to make sure that there's follow-up regarding that if that happens as an occasion. And I want to make sure that there's a system in place that we know where we can see like the progress that has changed. Like was there a talk to that professor about it? Was there like a department hearing about it? Was there a meeting, like et cetera, whatever that action may be? I want to see it happen with my eyes.
Got it. So another big part of the VP of Academic Affairs role is being the sole student to sit on the faculty senate. Most students don't even really know what goes on there.
Yeah.
So what do you think are ways that we can perhaps increase transparency about the body, especially when their decisions are so consequential?
I'm very glad you brought that up. Actually, Faculty Senate usually sends two of our students. So usually the VP of Academic Affairs, and then we have another committee member, usually whoever can actually make it to the meeting time that they set, which has been a little crazy. I think this year was Tuesday at 8 a.m. I believe it was at some very weird hours. But usually we have two members from our USG committee sit on it, but I do believe it is important that it's not just USG members. If we can get more student representation in the Faculty Senate, I think that's very important. Faculty Senate overall, to explain kind of how it goes, there's also several Faculty Senates for different things, which is something I have to specify. There's the big Faculty Senate, the one that kind of oversees all the other departments. And then there's like the specific ones, kind of like academic standing for one. What I can think of, there was a Faculty Senate, I believe, for our libraries. I think that was one that came up during our meetings because we were trying to find a representative to send. I'm trying to remember. There's quite a few, but I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but there's quite a few of them. But the Faculty Senate that the VP of Academic Affairs goes to is the one that kind of oversees all of them. And I think as VP of Academic Affairs, one of the things I want to do is make sure every time I go into those meetings, I record some of the discussions that were had, unless it's like something that the school wants to still keep confidential. Like I know I'd have to work with some of the faculty and staff about it, but within those guidelines, if can share that with the students through our USG PA drive, which is our public access drive, which is on our Instagram, which on our links, it's accessible to all students of Case Western. I want to like keep what looks kind of like our meeting minutes, or at least bullet pointed notes about some of the things that were discussed and some of the progress that was made during those meetings.
All right, yeah, that'd be a great step, I think. So one thing that the Faculty Senate, spent years on is just the general curriculum overhaul that's coming with the end of SAGES and the start of the new general education requirements. So what do you think USG's role is in that transition? Like, how do we ensure that faculty and administration know our feelings about the new classes, about the new structures, especially the freshmen who might not know, too much about USG, but they'll get the brunt of these changes, right? So.
Yeah, I think one benefit of having been a nursing student is that I don't have to select my classes. That's the one thing I am spared from. However, I think it's very important that we model something like what the nursing department does, which gives clear guidelines as to what classes you need to be taking in order to be graduating with the major that you would like, unless you're like modifying for your own major, of course. And to make sure that everyone's on track. I know I've had several conversations with some of my friends where they're like, my advisor's AWOL. I have no idea where they've gone. Like they've dropped off the face of the earth. I want something like that to be very much prevented. I want students to know where they're at in terms of their graduation progress at all times. And I think in USG's role, we want to make sure that working with our communications committee, for example, we get out that news as quickly as possible once everything is confirmed. Like, oh, what exactly are the changes and what does that mean for each individual class of students? I believe most of those changes aren't going to impact everyone who's already on the graduation path. For example, SAGES requirements will still be implemented for a lot of the class of 2024, 2023, et cetera. And we make sure that we specify for each individual class that it's a change for them and what those general education requirements are going to look like. Especially I remember with GER, we had a very lengthy discussion in our own committee about like, what exactly is that going to look like? And we were like, we don't know either yet. And once those answers are had, I think it's very important that we communicate them either through all of our channels like Instagram. I know Sedona, our current VP of comms, has done a very, very good job of making some of the infographics that make it onto our Instagram page. I know our communications department does a very, very good job with that. That's something I really would like to see. Our emailing list go out to all of our undergraduate student body. That is a method. However, I know not every one of us reads the emails, therefore maybe some infographics, visuals about what changes are going to be implemented through academic affairs would be very good.
All right. So Crew is experiencing larger and larger incoming classes and cohorts each year. So how do you see that sort of affecting the academic environment at Crew, and what can USG do to advocate for, the best student experience there?
I'm really glad you asked that, because that was actually a question that I had for President Kaler when he came to our GA a couple of weeks ago during Tuesday. And that was something that wasn't, personally for me, in my opinion, wasn't answered as well as I had hoped. He did answer, I am running off the top of my head. There may be a little bit of inaccuracy, just to get that out there. But he did answer that he is going to try and preserve a lot of the faculty to student ratio, which was something that I found was very important. There wasn't as good of an answer as to the academic spaces. I know right now we're already kind of facing a little bit of a crisis on terms of lecture halls and not having enough space, or having ones big enough for them. Like there's 300-person lectures. I know a lot of the freshman classes where everyone takes them together, they're very, very large and we don't have the space for them. The answer that we got was about like our chem labs, our bio labs, which wasn't like something that I was looking for in terms of an answer. So I believe like that's going to be something, if I'm VP of Academic Affairs, I'll be pushing for in the Faculty Senate, making sure that in the Case Western Master Plan that all of those numbers are being maintained. And not only just academic spaces in terms of our lecture halls, I want to make sure that there's enough spaces for our dining halls, like our spaces for just studying. I know like right now, most people study like on the quad, like in Nord. I know personally for me, I really like the medical school library. It's a very nice place to study. but it's not anything spacious to be completely transparent. And I want to make sure that moving forward, there's a lot of study spaces built into some of the dorms and housing, which would be not specifically academic affairs, but something I would have to cooperate with whoever becomes the vice president of student life. But overall, I think there's a lot of attention to detail that will need to be done in terms of what master plan Case Western is going to fall over the next few years, which President Taylor did confirm was now a little inaccurate. He did say there were some changes made during the pandemic due to some of the financial changes, due to some of the logistical changes. So we'll have to wait for some of the administration to respond in terms of what those changes are going to look like. But I want to make sure those changes are going in the direction that helps students rather than hurt them.
All right, great. That was a very comprehensive answer.
Yeah, sorry,
right.
it's a little long.
No, it was good. It was good. So I guess we've already covered my last sort of question, which was just talking about just maintaining those faculty to student ratios. I believe he talked about going from a 10-to-1 ratio to an 11-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, that was the specific response. I was sitting right in front actually when we had the conversation. So from my remembrance, it was along the lines of, we're going to try and preserve it, but if it becomes like 10-to-1, if it changes from the current 10-to-1 to like 11-to-1, I don't believe it's going to change the quality of our classroom drastically, which I do agree with if it's like a very minor change. However, like it depends on what the overall actual size looks like, I believe, because I know, like for me, for example, the class of 2024 in nursing, there's only about 60 something of us right now. So in terms of faculty to student ratio, we're like very low. And if we average that out between the campus with like classes where it's like one professor to 300 plus students in a classroom, it's going to look very different in terms of the average. It's going to skew a lot of our data. And I think it's important that we make sure that those faculty student ratios are being preserved throughout the schools where there's different amounts of students. For example, this year going in, we're going to have 4 student nursing reps and 3 weatherhead reps. And that's a little bit of a change in terms of what school has the most amount of students, which hasn't been seen in a couple of years. And so it's going to be very important to keep in mind, like, where are we allocating the resources between the schools and et cetera. And I think this is also a very good question to answer in terms of not just faculty student ratio, but in terms of our housing, which is something that I'm very much focusing on as well.
All right, great. All right, so I think that about covers all the topics I have. So on a more lighter note, to end, what's one thing that you really love about Case Western Reserve, but also what's one thing that you wish you would change that would be, what's one thing you wish would change about the university?
I think one thing I really like about Case Western, it's kind of the same answer for both. I really do like that we're a very close-knit community. I know that we're a pretty small school. I don't know the current total student population size off the top of my head, but I went to a very big high school. So actually the current college that I'm going to now with Case Western is about the same size as what my high school used to be total combined, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I really like the close-knit community. And at the same time, it's so difficult when I run into the same people all the time at the same time. So I think something that we really want to change is, you know, what we always talk about, like bursting some of the Case Western bubble, making sure we're reaching out into the community, making sure that we're getting a diverse assortment of students, making sure that they're getting the experience that they want within campus, even with like a small population size. And even as those population sizes change, making sure that the positive experiences are conserved.
All right, great. Well, that's all I have. So unless there's anything else you'd like to say to the student body or just to the editorial board as a whole, then I think we're all done. So
please consider Jungkook for Vice President of Academic Affairs. Of course, I do have to put that in there. And also I do want to make sure that people are aware that as VP of Academic Affairs, it doesn't mean I will neglect like some of the other initiatives that I'm working on, which might pertain a little more towards the student life aspect and something that might work more with whoever is taking it over after our dear Lou Stark is leaving. And one of those things that I'm focusing on is with housing, due to my focus on a lot of disability access, the maintenance of our dorm halls. I know recently I've talked to a maintenance officer who came to our house who checked out our basement, and he told me that, and I asked him a little bit about why there was a staffing crisis with the maintenance office, because we've noticed that within the last year or so, especially with the increase of students. And he said, do you know what the base pay starting for an engineer at the office of maintenance is currently? The starting base pay. And I said, I'm not sure. What would that exactly look like? And he goes, 19 an hour. Like, let that sink in a little bit. 19 an hour. And I think, I know as an undergraduate student government, we serve the students, but I think to serve the students, sometimes we really have to serve some of the staff and make sure that they're getting equitable treatment on our campus as well. And I think I just wanted to emphasize that that's something also that I keep in mind as we work through this. And I know there's a bit of a, I've personally felt like it's something that we should focus on, that our campus staff is a lot more racially diverse than our student body. And I think that sometimes it looks a little like that due to the people who work on our campus being from the Cleveland area. And I know Cleveland area is more predominantly Black, but I don't want it to be an issue where staff, faculty, and anyone who works on our campus feel that they're getting inequitable pay or inequitable access due to the fact that, due to the color of their skin, due to their identity. And I really want to focus on making sure that Case Western is keeping everyone in mind when they're creating a campus environment.
All right, great. Well, thanks for having me, or vice versa.
Thank you so much.
And then
I'm glad we kept in time. I was really thinking to go over time.
No, it's all good. It's all good. But yeah, all right. I hope you have good luck in this upcoming election, and be sure to look out for our endorsements when they come out on Friday.
Thank you. And thank you for having me today.
Yes,
Have a nice rest of your Sunday.
You too. All right, great. So thanks for coming in. Can you please introduce yourself and the position that you're running for?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Haley Lotta. I'm a rising senior and I'm studying classics and cognitive science. And I'm running to be the Vice President of Academic Affairs for the 2023-2024 school year.
Great. So can you talk about what positions in USG that you've held, your previous experience in student government?
Yeah, sure. So I first joined USG my freshman year when during COVID. It was a little tough, but I was a freshman representative. And in that role, I served on the Faculty Senate Committee for University Libraries through the Academic Affairs Committee, which is essentially just working with admin to talk about libraries and what the needs are there. And then my next year, my sophomore year, I was also a CAS representative. And in that role, I was a FISCU rep. And so people who don't know what FISCU is, it's the Faculty Senate Committee on Undergraduate Education. And so essentially what that is a bunch of faculty members meet and they have two student representatives. I was one of them, and the vice president that year, Nikhil, was the other. And so what we did was just talk about current academic issues and sort of voiced our input on what we thought would be beneficial. And then last semester, I actually served as the Vice President of Academic Affairs, the position I'm running for now. And in that role, I served on Faculty Senate and on FISCU again.
Great. You had to drop the role because you studied abroad, correct?
Yes, I'm actually in Rome right now.
Oh, great. I hope the time difference is okay. But,
yeah, it's only 10 p.m., so it's okay.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
But yeah, so tell me about your platform. Why do you want to run? And if there are any differences between, the last time you ran and this time around?
Yeah, sure. So my platform, I think the biggest thing I want to work on is increasing sort of the connections between Crew and the Cleveland community. So one of the things I worked on last year in my role as VPAA was this humanities-based initiative. So again, I'm a classics major, so most of my sort of academic focus is centered around the humanities, but I also have that cognitive science side as well. But I worked with the Baker Nord Center for the Humanities last semester to try to increase sort of the visibility of the humanities and the courses we offer. And so what I did with them, I worked with Maggie, I don't know if you know her, Maggie, she works in the Baker Nord Center, and she essentially, me and her worked together on building a part of their website to list all of the course offerings for the humanities so that students could view them and see what's coming up next. And the reason why I really wanted to do that was because I feel like there's a lot of really cool courses, especially in the humanities section, that not a lot of people at Case really know about. For example, last year there was a class with it was like a printmaking class where students were able to go to the Zygote Press and learn how to make prints. Like, and I just thought that was really interesting, and I really wanted more students to learn about those sort of things. And so the reason why I ran last year was just so that I would be able to improve academics on campus. My biggest platform was working with the syllabus archive and midterm grade policy. So it was increasing transparency between students and admin on these sort of like very interesting academic policies. Versus this year, what I really want to work on is something that we've been working on since last semester, which is the syllabus archive. So what we're trying to do is make an archive available for students that contains syllabi, or at least relevant syllabi questions. Like, for example, like how many tests are there? What are the grading policies? What textbooks do you need, et cetera, and have that all be available to students before course registration, so that they're able to have a better understanding of what courses they're taking, which is especially pertinent for non-required courses.
All right, great. So, you've been in USG for a while. You've been on the academic affairs committee. In fact, you were the VP last year. So,
academic affairs is my thing.
Exactly. So, what is one aspect of USG and specifically the academic affairs committee that you think has done really well in the last year, and what's something that you think could improve, whether it be operationally or just how things are going?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think one thing we've done really well, at least committee-wise, and then I'll talk a little bit more about like in terms of getting things done. So I think committee-wise, we've always been like a very tight-knit committee, and very like, we know each other very well, and we all know what each other's working on, which is something that I really like, and something I really tried to bring together last semester. I always tried to do committee bonding and like try to get us out in the open. And so that's something I really enjoy about my committee. And in terms of getting things done, I think one thing that we've been good at is it's really hard with academic affairs to get initiatives rolled over, because our initiatives are very long-standing. There's something that will take years and years to implement, because you have to work with administration, you have to get whole things changed. Like if we're looking at the GER, which was recently implemented, it will start happening next fall. That was years and years, like decades of discussion, and then years and years and years of work. So it's definitely a difficult role in that sense, because it's like the instant gratification isn't quite there. But one thing that I really liked about doing in this committee is at least being able to find small things that we're able to do in the meanwhile, like little stopgap solutions. Like, for example, the Baker Nord thing I was talking about last semester. We wanted to do that, and so we were able to find a really easy way to get at least something done. So we were able to get like a website made, which is really great. But it's definitely a little bit difficult trying to get initiatives turned around, but I think it's so worth it because so much good comes out of it. I remember my freshman year during COVID, Badisha, the vice president before Nikhil, started a student workload initiative. And just to sort of like gauge how students were feeling in terms of workload and like what was going on, so that, professors could respond in an appropriate manner to like see where students were at. And that was a very long initiative, because we had to get surveys, and we had to get surveys approved, and then re-surveys and more surveys, and then data analysis. And so it can definitely be very tough, but I love it, and it's so worth it in the end, because you get such good out of it, and it affects the whole campus community, which is what's most important.
For sure, and that's why we're all here, right? Academics, theoretically, at least.
Exactly, yes.
All right, Grace. Let's move on to academic affairs related questions. So,
Sure.
You've been in the committee for a while, but also you are a Cru student. So, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing Cru students in the classroom space, and what can USG do to advocate for those sort of issues?
Biggest issues. So I know one of the biggest one has to do with course registration, and there not being enough open seats for classes. I know especially with like lab classes or like smaller classes where there's like sections, but they're all required for like biology, chemistry, all these like majors that make up like 60% of the Cru population. And so it's really tough for students to find those classes in the appropriate time. So for example, like you're a sophomore, you want to get a biology lab, you need to take your sophomore year. It might be tough to get because there's juniors who are taking those spots that year because they also need that requirement. So it's really hard to get those labs. And I remember last semester, I think it was last semester, Mikhail, he is the vice president of student life currently. I think he had an interview earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. He works on an initiative to open up more lab spaces in a specific biology lab. I can't remember the course code right now. I'm so sorry. But he essentially worked with a professor to try to open up more spots in a recitation for the lab. And I think that's definitely something that's really important and really necessary for students, especially when there's a lot of people in one major who all need this one credit and there's only like 10 spots and it's like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll get to student population in a bit, but before we do, as you mentioned, part of the job is sitting on the faculty senate, being one of the few students who are able to interact with that. Most students don't know what goes on there, like as a whole.
No, not at all.
So, do you think there are ways that we can increase transparency there, and especially, when the decisions the body makes are so consequential? It may take years to make decisions, but
I agree. And the thing that's kind of annoying about that, at least from the student perspective, is that the decision is made, no one really knows about it because only like one student is in the meeting. And then 5 years later, you're like, oh, this is happening, right? And like no one knows what's happening because no one was talking about it. And so one thing I always try to do with my committee, at least last semester, to sort of work on some of these issues, was I'd take notes during the meetings and I'd go straight to my committee and be like, hey, this is exactly what happened. This is what they're talking about. I remember there was one faculty senate meeting where President Kaler only spoke about like maternity. There was essentially, they were discussing trying to build make a building so that faculty members with children or like students with children could like put their kids in, and like trying to build a complex for that, like sort of daycare center. And I remember I was like, I don't know if this is pertinent, but I'm going to tell my committee anyways. And they were like, why are you telling me this? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe it'll help. So I think there's definitely, at least telling your committee, trying to get the word out. I think word of mouth is the best way to do it. And even maybe one thing I've been thinking about and sort of like workshopping with some of the other people in USG is sort of having like an updates page on the USG website, or some sort of way that we could at least connect with the observer to talk about like, hey, this is what I heard. Hey, this is like something that might be happening. Hey, and just sort of like talking and just, letting everyone know what's going on, because definitely not many people even know that faculty senate even exists. And some of the most important decisions happen there.
Exactly. I mean, in general, the USG website needs to be updated a little bit in terms of transparency. That's a bit of an understatement, but yeah, so that's good to hear. Speaking of very consequential decisions, as you said, SAGES is being completely overhauled. The curriculum as a whole is being completely overhauled. There's the start of the new GER, general education requirements. So what do you think USG's role is in this transition? How do we make sure that faculty and administration know our feelings about how these new classes are going, how these new systems are going, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially since I've been involved in these discussions for like 3 years now, because I was in faculty senate my freshman year as well. I think the best thing, at least from the academic affairs standing, sort of like my position in like these committees, is like just saying like what you need to say. I remember there was one time I was like a little freshman and I was like in one of these big scary meetings, and Dean Wolkowitz messaged me. He's like, just talk, like just say something, because like professors and teachers, they need to hear the student opinion. Like they need to hear what we have to say, because what we say is very important, because we know a lot more about the student experience than administration do. They know a lot. I don't want to diss on that at all. They know so much, but being a student is so much different than being an administrator. And we definitely have a very crucial voice in that. And I remember specifically, so do you remember J-term? I think that happened during COVID, like last year, where we had the classes. I remember I was in one meeting where the professors were all talking and sort of discussing like their thoughts on J-term and what they wanted out of it, and sort of what they thought the students wanted. And I remember Nikhil and I were like, very much like, we're not on board with this, because essentially what they were saying was that if we were to implement J-term, the break would be too long. So it would be 5 weeks instead of the usual 3. But Nikhil and I were like, we could use 5 breaks. Like I think students would want that, because I feel like, especially compared to other universities, um, even if you weren't to take another class, like it's kind of nice to just have 5 weeks and to be away from academics. And I think that's something admin doesn't get all the time.
Especially since we didn't have the spring break, I think either that year or the year before. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, yes, academics, but also students kind of want to just sit and rest and have some time to themselves, which is so important.
Yeah. So the brunt of the stages changes, or I guess it'll be Uyghur or GER next year. I don't think they've
Uyghur, yeah, whatever.
It was
Yes.
Kruger, it was Gur, and I was Uyghur.
It was everything. It was everything in between. I like
Yeah.
don't even know anymore.
Regardless, the brunt of the changes will be hitting freshmen, and freshmen are likely the
Yes.
least likely to be engaged with USG to even know that they can talk to their USG representative about the issues that they're having. So do you have any plans as to how to reach out to them so that you do get their feedback regarding how these new courses are going, how this new system is going?
Yeah, sure. So I definitely think that USG should reach out to freshmen when they arrive, because um there's already, I mean, there's support for freshmen when you come in. You have your advisor, you have your faculty, you have blah, blah, blah. But there isn't so much of a peer system where you have peers you can rely on who have been through these same courses and who know sort of how to guide you or have heard these conversations. So I think one thing that's super important is sort of implementing sort of peer mentorship from USG, from the student body into the freshman class. I remember one of the things that I discussed in FISCU was when we were talking about pre-major advising and what that would look like. There was a lot of discussion, but one of the points I raised was, on top of pre-major advising, it might be helpful if we have something sort of like, you know how the engineer students have the like peer advisors, like the CSE peer advisors. I think something like that would be super helpful for like upperclassmen to be peer advisors for freshmen, even though we don't have the same sort of SAGES experience that they will have, because they're completely different. Not completely, but they're different requirements, et cetera, et cetera. I think it would be super helpful for upperclassmen to have that relationship with freshmen and to be able to help them get through the process, because an advisor only knows so much. They know a lot, but they haven't been in the university recently. You know what I mean? So I think that's super important.
I mean, advising as a whole is getting a shakedown at crew right now, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm a little, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of which, do you have any thoughts on the Navigator program currently and the potential change that could happen there?
Yeah, that's a question.
Yeah.
That's everyone's question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, the navigators have been in discussion for so long, for so long. I remember Alex Siegel and Gari, the new VP for this semester, worked on that for the past 2 years, and trying to figure out what that will look like. And that's been a very long process. So what specifically are you asking about in terms of the navigators? I don't want to like tread on anyone's
Yeah,
toes.
no. So what do you think, um, you know, there have been a number of proposed changes there. So what do you hope to see come out of this discussion, I guess?
Okay. What do I hope to see out of the navigators? I hope it gets better. I think overall, and I think that's what everyone wants as well. I think it's tough. I think the toughest thing with the advising structure and navigators is just that there's so many people, right? There's like, you have your advisor, you have your navigator, you have your pre-major advisor, then you have your advisor, and then blah, 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 blah. And I think that's tough, especially when you're a freshman and you have like, who do I contact? Like, if I have an academic issue, do I have to talk to my advisor? Do I have to talk to my navigator? Who do I speak to? And then everyone tells you different things and you don't know what's going on. And then you can't find a meeting and it's just very frustrating. So what I hope to get out of that is just a better system. I don't want to, being a VP, I don't really want to say anything like too much, if that makes sense. But I definitely, I want more of a defined sort of, not hierarchy, but sort of like a defined structure for freshmen where that's like on a page somewhere where it's like, you go to navigator for this, you go to advisor for this, you go to your peers for this, and sort of like a more defined structure for each of the roles and what those look like moving forward, especially since it's going to get a little strange with the new GER rolling out the relationship between pre-major advisors, and navigators, that's going to be a tough question that I think even admin is a little scared to untangle at this moment.
Yeah, it's unclear exactly how pre-major advisors are going to be assigned. I know it's based off of academic interest, but Crew being one of the only schools you can switch around majors very easily. We'll see how it works out. But regardless.
Yeah. I hope that maybe one of the things I was thinking about in terms of academic interest was that like maybe there can be a survey sent out to students so they can say like XXXXX are like the things I want, like the things that I'm interested in. Here's what I like. And then hopefully you can find someone in the department.
Right.
Because I know it's a little tough because it's like faculty members are already like over encumbered with
Right.
advisees anyways.
All right, let's move on. I think that's enough. Maybe we can continue this conversation when the changes actually happen.
Yeah, sure. Of course. You're always welcome to reach out to me.
Regardless, Crew is, expanding. As you know, we're having larger and larger incoming cohorts each year. So, how do you think this might impact the academic environment at Crew? There's been a lot of discussion about, the faculty to student ratio, creating new sections. I don't know. What do you see being the major issues, and what do you think we can actually, tell administration as to our concerns?
Yeah, I think it definitely ties back to the issue I was talking about before in terms of like course registration and trying to find spots for students. Because it's unfair for students to be in a 500-person lecture hall, but it's also unfair for professors to teach 5 different courses of the same section. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like trying to find that middle ground between what's best for the faculty and what's best for the students, which is something that is really tough to do, but it's also something that I've really appreciated being in USG and sort of trying to figure out how to speak to administration and how to speak to students and try to find some sort of compromise in terms of that.
Yeah, great. I mean, you don't have to comment on this, but
okay, I'm scared. Oh no.
When I talked to President Kaler about this, about concerns about too many sections for professors and stuff like that, and how are we going to make it this fit in lecture halls? He was like, Crew isn't flexible enough. We start most classes at 10 a.m. and finish most classes at 4 p.m. So there's no reason why we can't start at 8 a.m. and go until 7 p.m.
Let's start 9 p.m. classes.
Yeah. So it's I personally know a lot of people who take very late night classes and very early morning classes. So it's
yeah. I was one of them. Yeah.
Obviously it's not preferable. So that was an interesting take from him. But regardless, I think that covers that. But yeah, to end, this is the fun question. What do you love about Case Western Reserve, and what's one thing you wish you could change about it? It can be a silly thing, it can be a serious thing, your choice.
Ooh, okay. I just have to say, okay, this is going to be very cheesy, so you're going to have to put up with it.
Okay.
But I think my favorite part of Case is just, again, the people I've met and the experiences I've had that have led to who I am today. Just for like a little story, I guess, to make this sound less cheesy. I came into Case as a psychology student. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Genuinely, I was like, this sounds fine. I'll do this. And then my sophomore year, I was sort of doubting my choice as a psychology student. I was coming out of COVID. I was sort of, a lot of things were happening. And then I took my first classics class with Dr. Hammond. And that just like opened my eyes because it's just something that I really loved. And I feel like I never would have really let myself pursue that had I been anywhere else. And then I followed that up with another class by Dr. Adkins. I took her Introduction to the Ancient Rome class, second semester. And I just fell in love with my major and I just decided to switch. I did a full 180 and switched to become a classics major, and I love it. And through that, I've been able to find so many new experiences that I never even knew existed. Like right now I work in KSL as like with book restoration and repair. So I work in the preservation lab and the archives. And that sort of opened my eyes to learning more about like art conservation and trying to figure out new things with like art and learning about art and the intersection between art and science in particular, which I think is so profound at Case in particular, because we have literally the second best museum in the world, like right next to us. And then we have one of the best engineering schools also like that we're at. And so it's just such a great connection between those two. And I really want to work with that. I think I talked about that a little bit in my LOI as well, but wanting to sort of expand that connection because it's very special to me personally. And I think it's something that is very unique about Case that I truly love.
Yeah, it's even in the name, Case and Western Reserve, you know, the coming
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and then the one thing you could change?
Oh, one thing I could change. Okay. I think in an ideal world, I would love if Case was more in the center of Cleveland or like more, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that's how the Case School of Applied Sciences started, but
I know,
it was
yes.
just one house, I think, at the time. But yeah, they
Yeah,
quickly
just one.
yeah.
I love where Cleveland's at. I think it's a beautiful area. Like I think we're in a beautiful area of Cleveland, but I think it would also be nice to have more of the surrounding area be a little bit closer. This is something we can't change. So this is just a silly throwaway answer.
Oh, for sure.
But I just know that I have a car when I go to Case, so I've been able to explore a lot of Cleveland, and there's just so many hidden gems that so many people at Case just don't know about. Back to sort of the art connection, like my boss at KSL, he also works at the Morgan Conservatory, which is like a 10-minute drive, and then the Zygote Press. There's so many beautiful places nearby that we could really capitalize on that connection to, but it would have to be like an RTA trip, or you'd have to have a friend with a car, like things like that. And so I just wish we were all a little bit more smushed together.
Yeah, a bit more dense. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
As yeah, that's all the questions I have. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and good luck
Yeah.
with the campaign.
Thank you so much.
Get some sleep.
Oh, I'll try. Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
You too.
Bye.